Okay, my name is Steve Kaplan. I'm Vice President of Data Center Virtualization, and we're here to talk about why it's essential to take a strategic approach to virtualization when building a private cloud. Our panelists today are Kevin Carr with Denton County, Texas. Kevin is Director of Information Services. Khalida Anjum, Director of Information Technology for Middlesex County, New Jersey. And John Walton, Deputy CIO, City and County of San Francisco, right here in California. I was just saying at VMworld, I think they're expecting 17,000 attendees, so this is good for the San Francisco economy. So the format for today is I'm going to go ahead and start off with a question for each of the panelists, and then I'll go ahead and open it up to the audience. And in order to encourage you to participate, I did bring some copies of my book. It's called VMware, Foundation for Cloud Computing with VMware, vSphere 4. And I'm going to go ahead and give away copies to about the first 10 people who ask questions. Have some other people from INX in the audience that will do it. And I co-authored this with John Aristid of VMware, who's VCDX number 1, and Duncan Epping, also VMware out of Denmark, who's VCDX number 7. But all of us will be at the VMworld, they have a VMworld store tomorrow at 3 o'clock for a book signing. I do have to warn you, though, that unlike John and Duncan, my signature actually will reduce the value of the book by about 50% if you go to resell it on eBay. So Gartner says that the typical organization is only about 20% virtualized or so. I know that in my experience, most organizations that I come across are generally somewhere between 10% and 50% virtualized. But the problem is that they still tend to manage their data centers from this physical perspective, from a physical filter with physical methodologies and tool sets, and they have these virtual machines on the side. And the problem with that scenario is that the virtual machines, while they doubtlessly reduce cost in areas such as equipment and facilities and power, overall complexity and overall requirements on the IT staff actually tend to increase. And the reason why that is because the IT staff still has to manage this whole physical infrastructure, complete with its, all its inefficiencies and its very high cost. So now they have a lot less resources available, they have a lot less money available for having to manage their virtual infrastructure. And virtual infrastructure is just a wonderful thing, but it does have its own set of challenges and issues. I mean, there's things you have to worry about like I/O performance issues, VM sprawl is a big one. Just trying to efficiently, design your deployment and manage it to efficiently provision virtual infrastructure. And then you have a lot more objects that, of course, that you have to manage too. You have all those virtual machines and your hypervisor and your ESX host and your virtual switches and your virtual adapters and so on. So the end result, what tends to happen is that organizations kind of get stuck in this hybrid approach. And the IT staff, which is already, overworked, has to continually go back to the well, trying to get, scrape up what monies they can to get more memory for their ESX host, or to get more licensing, or to maybe buy some more host, or to get some more storage, just so they can continue this kind of tactical, unplanned approach to virtualization. And this is opposed to adopting a very strategic approach to virtualizing the entire data center and looking at it all from a virtual filter with all the latest virtualization methodologies and toolkits, and then treating any physical servers that remain as one-offs. That changes the whole economics. It's far more money, it's far more efficient, and lots of other great benefits besides. So our panelists today are leaders in their industry because not only have they embraced this concept of complete virtualization for their respective counties, but they made the commitment to transition their IT to a private cloud, complete with monitoring, metering, eventually chargeback, and of course, increasing automation. More than that, they've also determined, or they also want to extend their private clouds beyond their own data center borders and eventually encompass other cities, except for San Francisco's case, other agencies, and potentially even other public sector organizations. So I'm going to go ahead and start off the questioning now, and we'll start with Kevin. So This is Kevin Carr of Denton County, Texas. Kevin, I know originally, before you decided to strategically virtualize your data center, you were running about 24 VMs on Hyper-V. I think you were pretty happy. Why the change to VMware vSphere for your enterprise rollout?
Well, first of all, as I was telling y'all earlier, if my Microsoft account manager is in here, can you stand up real quick? I was given this presentation, I don't know, I guess it was about 8 months ago, and my Microsoft account manager was at the back of the room glaring at me, and ever since then, all of my quotes come back with an extra zero on the end, so I've just got to be careful. Yeah, we had a lot of the same challenges that everyone else has with the physical infrastructure. We were just out of space. We did have about 24 VMs running on a Hyper-V R1 server. And it worked fairly well. We were happy with it. Our issue, though, was we wanted to go much further beyond that. We had about 150 physical servers that we wanted to virtualize. And we had several problems with our Microsoft system. It was fairly difficult to manage, especially as we increased. Another problem we had was finding any partners that shared the same vision that we had with virtualizing a large number of hosts. And none of them were, at least the partners that we worked with, were ready or able to help us with that. Another big problem was a lot of the software we were running didn't have any type of support for Hyper-V. You know, a lot of our software manufacturers said, well, it might work, but we don't support it. A lot of those did support VMware, though. So we were, Steve's with INX, they had done a lot of work for us before with our Cisco environment, so we were familiar with them, and they came in and told us that, told us more about VMware, told us about all the mature feature set that it had that wasn't available in Hyper-V. So we were just a lot more comfortable with the maturity of the VMware product and the maturity of the vendors who were providing support and were able to help us implement that.
Thanks, Kevin. So, John, when I sat down with your COO at the time and made our pitch, the first thing even before I could make our pitch, actually, right when I sat down with him, first thing he said to me is, "I've made my decision. I'm going with Hyper-V." And so why the change for the county?
Sure. So, again, John Walton, City, County, San Francisco. Thank you all for coming and helping our economy out. You're helping my budget, whether you realize that or not. So I do appreciate everyone registering. Go buy expensive meals, stay in expensive hotels. That's all good for me in balancing our budget. The city's a large, complex place. If I can just check in real quick, how many of you have worked for government or work with the government currently? Okay, good. So sometimes these talks I give are somewhat more educational than anything else, but a lot of you will be able to relate to some of my comments then. So just to give you some background to what Steve just said about the early days of virtualization in the city of San Francisco, we are both a city and a county, close to 1 million population, roughly 25,000 to 30,000 employees providing services to the city, $6.6 billion annual budget, of which IT is a portion of it. I have several roles. One is the deputy director for the internal IT department, which makes up about 30% of the workforce of IT in the city. So we are a very decentralized organization. We have close to 1,000 or 1,200 IT employees in the city. I manage directly about 300 of them. And of the data centers, I manage one of roughly 40 data centers in the city. And I use the term data centers loosely, a room where we store servers in the city. So, as Steve said, when we started our journey down this road, we had an old data center that we were trying to get out of. It was built back in the 70s, 80s. It was designed rather organically, shall we say, in how it was made. Very non-standardized equipment, not a homogeneous environment whatsoever. So we initially had a vision. We were operating in a model 3 or 4 years ago in the city, which is not untypical of other large government organizations. We operate in some sense more like a state or the federal government, where we're a loose confederation of independent operating business units, right? So there is a big budget, but it all is divvied out to departments, and everyone, to some extent, has the latitude to go out and buy and implement technology the way they see fit. So we've implemented in the last 3 years a new governance structure for IT which is another one of my roles. I'm what they call the director of the central IT governance body, which decides what is our strategy, where are we trying to go, what are we trying to achieve as a city with technology, not what is each department doing individually, and does that make sense? So the initial technology discussions and strategy for the central IT department really did revolve around Hyper-V. We have a very good relationship with Microsoft. I never looked at my bills closely enough, but I'll have to go back and look now. But the relationship was a good one. We had a good business case, I think, for virtualizing a lot of our Wintel machines, Windows machines from our old data center to get a smaller footprint. We couldn't afford to build a new data center, so we're going to a co-location site. And, of course, co-location sites are expensive. We wanted as small a footprint as possible in our co-location site. And so we had a good strategy to virtualize our servers. But when we took our strategy, and then I stepped back and put my hat on of the overall city governance, and we looked at what are other departments in the city doing, which have as large, if not larger, IT workforces than I do. What are they doing in their data centers? How many data centers do we have? What is really our strategy? What are we trying to achieve as a city and a county through virtualization? It was a much bigger idea it grew into than just virtualize 300 of my servers to get a smaller footprint to fit them into a co-location center. It was really virtualizing data centers as a whole, reducing the total number of data centers in the city, going to this idea of a virtualized data center based on, Cisco Nexus switches, UCS blades, VMware, which was a much better fit for us in terms of ROI, strategy when it came to security, disaster recovery, business continuity plan management. If we have enough time, we can get into our strategy around an overarching architecture or management philosophy with different private shared clouds managed by different semi-independent organizations within the city. And really that was the change for us, and we worked closely with Steve and other consultants really to come up with a new vision and to revision where we wanted to go as a city and what we wanted the outcome to be. Because as a city, and you all know this, you have so rarely an opportunity to spend a significant amount of money to make a change. And once that money's spent, everyone expects that investment to last 5, 10, 15 years. And so you can't afford to start something, spend $2, $3, $4 million and then say, oh, I changed my mind. We have a better way to do it now. So we've rethought our strategy. We're still pushing forward very aggressively. And the good thing for us is organizationally, we've made it a much bigger initiative now in the city, and there's it's really become a catalyst for collaboration. It's broken down a lot of the cultural barriers and walls because we're not seen as a single department doing our own thing. We have weekly meetings with all the data center managers in the city. We talk about a group strategy about where we're going, how we're going to implement it, and it meets a lot of our city goals jointly. How to save money, how to be more green. If you've seen all our recycle bins, we're very, very interested in being green in San Francisco. How to reduce our carbon footprint. So it has achieved in a very short amount of time a lot of the goals and objectives that we as a city have set for ourselves to work together better as an IT community across our disparate organizations.
Thanks, John. For Khalid Anjem, with Middlesex, Khalid, I know, like many organizations, the first step for you was to virtualize your data centers, virtualize your disaster recovery, and then you started looking at the desktops. And originally you told me that you were going to go down the Citrix road, but you decided to end up going with View. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure, Steve, and thank you so much. I really appreciate being here, and I feel very fortunate to be part of this great event. Basically, Middlesex County is a county of 750,000 people. We're a $450 million organization, but the staff that we have is 14. We support about 2,000 desktops and about 100 servers, distributed in 14 satellite offices connected via a private network. The challenge we have in Middlesex, much like the challenges that most of you who are in government face, is shrinking budgets, need to do more with less, demand to be always responsive, make sure your data is protected, and don't ask for more money and don't ask for more staff, right? Familiar? So how do you do that? I mean, the only way you do that is by bringing efficiencies into your operation. And there's no better IT efficiency than to virtualize your data center. And that's what we did. We virtualized 70 servers into 7 hosts. We basically brought all the tools that are data center tools to manage those servers, and we implemented SRM, because the most critical thing is to secure your data, because we have things such as continuity of government and continuity of operations. And anyone who's the head of IT has that burden that if something happens, God forbid, and you're not able to pull that data, then it doesn't just hurt the IT department and the IT manager, it hurts the governing body, because that's going to be in the newspaper. So in order to avoid those things, it becomes necessary to implement some of these highly efficient methodologies to make sure that A, the data is there when you need it, that B, the users are not going to be upset because it's lost. I mean, and you'll resonate with this. The government, at least in government, there's very little tolerance for anything going wrong. I mean, everybody's pointing fingers to you. It's a shark attack. So under these conditions, it's very prudent to have the technologies in place that, basically avoids getting hurt. So that's what we did. And Steve's question about why we chose, what did we choose?
View instead of Zen Desktop.
View instead of Zen Desktop is basically because we looked at it very carefully, and Steve was very helpful in identifying that and charting that process for us. Basically, we looked at both Citrix and the View. And we looked at the protocol, ICA, RCA, and then we said, okay, the next, HDX versus PC over IP. And then we looked at the actual management and installation of these, the ease of installation and management. You have one console versus 6 consoles. You looked at the licensing costs. The licensing costs with Citrix are much lower than with, View is much less than Citrix. And the back-end integration is already there. My staff is already trained in the View environment. So it just makes it logical to continue along that path. And basically, some of the other things are, the storage requirements are less when you compare the View versus the Citrix.
Thanks, Khalid.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to open up for questions from the audience now. Whoever wants a free book. Questions? Yes, sir.
One question I have is, are you actually contracting with an outside vendor at all, or are you just for a cloud services, or are you just using internally providing the services out to other departments inside the county, for example, or the state?
All of the above. We're doing software as a service. We're in the middle of right now one project where we're actually moving all of our email. We have about 7 different email systems in the city, consolidate them into one and moving it to a hosted exchange model in the cloud, software as a service. We are doing some cloud type services. We have an initiative underway with one of our GIS projects where we're doing a project with 3Tera to do some cloud-based application hosting, serving things up. One of the challenges that, those of you that work with government is, the security side and just a cultural comfort level with moving things out. We've had good luck with moving what I would call point solutions to a hosted side where there isn't a lot of confidentiality or security concerns about it, more public-facing applications or things that we feel like there's a track record where either the public-private sector has done it successfully. So we run our Clarity CA project management system and a hosted solution. Like I said, we're going with email. We're running a lot of our websites on a hosted solution now. So we're moving some things, but there are a lot of applications and a lot of infrastructure that we still don't have, I think, a cultural or organizational comfort level with moving it to a fully cloud-based. It's come up a number of times. Microsoft's come in and pitched, their new Azure platform to us and things like that. And it's not that we're unaware of it. And all of us, we're fortunate enough to be here near the Silicon Valley. We all have friends in startups. We all have friends. We see what's happening, and we certainly try to stay abreast of it. But you have to remember a lot of the culture of governments is, employees that have been in a place for 30 or 40 years. It's just a big deal to go from a city-owned facility to a co-location facility, a lights-out facility. So we're looking at all of them. Our strategy right now is to partner externally where it makes sense, where we can sell that in a business case to the business units, and it saves us money, or it gets us out of the hardware facilities business. But for where we can't make a compelling business case, where there's a better comfort level to keep things internally, what we're looking at is a private shared cloud infrastructure that we're trying to create. Again, rather than every department create their own mini cloud, like has been the practice in the past, really go to several locations where we have shared clouds managed in a standard way where they can back each other up, share resources across the clouds, and provide a infrastructure as a service or software as a service to internal customers. And then we hope, we are a large government. And if we can be successful at this, we do have a lot of Bay Area initiatives going on. There's a lot of governments that frankly struggle, and we're hoping we can be sort of like what the state does in terms of letting people piggyback on their contracts or piggyback on their solutions, provide some of those same things to some of the smaller local governments around us that want to use the same solutions, and then we could just add them on as clients to our clouds.
One other question. When I work for VMware County in Pennsylvania, we deal with a lot of the nursing homes, the prison stuff, all those other fun, very secure HIPAA and everything, those other regulations. Do you see a lot of problems with that? Maybe something like that out to Azure or one of those other cloud-based systems?
It'll probably be one of the ones that is a laggard in terms of moving. I mean, in terms of how we're constructing our private clouds, we have a public safety cloud, we have a public health cloud, right? So we're creating, to some extent, our strategy is to some extent looking at what our customers are by groups, and then looking at what their security or sort of cultural comfort level is and grouping them together. Public health for us is a third of our organization in San Francisco is the public health department. We also have a police department, the sheriff's department, who house the prisoners, the police who arrest people. We have a district attorney, a city attorney. We have the public safety group as well. So it's certainly they are some of the least excited about pushing stuff externally. On the other hand, our public health department does have a number of applications they already run in a hosted environment out of Pennsylvania, as a matter of fact. One of their mainframe apps actually runs on a mainframe back. So there's a growing appreciation that you can do things securely externally, but there's still a comfort level with being able to go and tap the person on the shoulder that's responsible for it.
Blazers. Yes, sir. Black blazer. No, you. Yep.
Yeah, it's we certainly have timelines set to it. What I usually, and we're a highly unionized environment. The thing I usually tell staff or partners or policymakers in the city when we talk about our strategy and timelines, there's really two factors. One, how long should it realistically take? So when we look at other government agencies that do these things, they take a year to plan, take a year to test, that's all fine and good. What we're driven by like most other governments is falling revenues in government, right? We lagged behind the dip that private sector saw, but last year our city budget shortfall was $500 million. They're projecting this next year we're going to be $700 million short again. Just my IT's budget hit this last year was I had cut $9.5 million out of my base budget just as part of my budget reduction. So though I'd like to take a reasonable amount of time to implement these ideas, the reality of it is I'm being driven by as one of the other panelists said, I'm being driven by my workforce is shrinking, my budget is shrinking. So it's not that, ROI is good and you should do things because of ROI. You should do things because it makes sense. You should do things because it's a good architectural and strategic direction to go. On the other hand, if you're in charge of a department and the reality of it is you have to cut somewhere, you have to come up with a strategy where you can continue to deliver services, and my goal is to deliver better services with less people and less money. So really our horizon on the data center, virtualized data center consolidation is a 2-year horizon. And we're looking for final approval of our plan in September.
And the black blazer right there.
What was your reason for choosing the 1000V, and what was your experience?
We're still in the middle of implementation. We've had a long partnership with Cisco, and I would say, we looked at some Juniper equipment, we looked at Cisco. Again, it goes back to our strategy, I think, with what, not just what we're trying to do on the network side of the house. Again, for us, it's a change in how we plan and strategize where we're going in the future. So in the past, we would have one network group and one department making decisions about their network and what equipment they liked and how they configure it. And then my department, who manages the WAN, would make their decisions. And so what this has done is really forced us to step back and say, what are we trying to achieve with network services as a service for the entire city? Are we trying to achieve desktop virtualization, voice over IP, quality of service, security? Some of you may have heard we had a bit of a security problem a few years ago. So it has really, when we looked at what we're trying to achieve as a city, and given the fact that, again, that we are in a highly federated, if you want to put it that way, organization where I don't make all the decisions. I have final procurement authority about who gets to buy what, but really my job is to bring in all the very smart people from every department and say, okay, I have 40 departments, 10 of them own 80% of the IT workforce, so of those 10, what can we all agree upon as our standard that we will jointly support, train our staff on, because my training budget's shrinking. If Cisco is ubiquitous as a standard out in the departments, sorry not to bore everyone how civil service works, but every time there's layoffs, it's civil service. There's bumping that goes on between departments. So if I lay off 30 people, doesn't mean they lose their jobs. They may bump to some other department based on seniority and get a job somewhere else. So as IT managers, we all had to look at it and go, hey, if I'm training this person here and I may lose them due to seniority and they're going to bump to your department, what common skills can we train our staff in so as they bump around? And for us, at least from a technological standpoint, the Cisco and VMware solution was a very complementary solution. There did not seem to be as many pitfalls in going down that road with where we wanted to go with virtualized data centers, with what we wanted to do with voice over IP in the future, and quality of service and security things. So it seemed to be a good bet. Like I said, my department, the airport, PUC, and one other department are still some of the early adopters of that technology, but so far it seems to be working well for us.
Kevin, how about you? Why did you go with the 1000V?
Yeah, I think we have a very similar story. We use Cisco all over our entire county, and it really made sense for us to go with the 1000V with our VMware environment. It instantly made the people who supported our network very comfortable with setting up networking in VMware. So, and we've been very pleased with it since then.
Thanks. In the blazer there.
My question goes to, because you virtualize the data center, you're more enabled to utilize either colo or maybe infrastructure as a service. Is that either in process or technology enabling you to consume other things like software as a service class and or platform as a service, rewriting some applications and utilizing the outside platform? Is that something that this work has extended to, or is it much more limited around the data center itself and your utilization of the data center?
Khalid?
I think if you really look at it, you could provide even desktop as a service, but it comes at a cost. So I think what has to happen is you have to look at the cost of delivering those services and compare it to what it would cost to deliver those services in the traditional sense. And with respect to software as a service, we've been implementing some applications in that fashion, the only disadvantage to that is you tend to kind of lose control. But if you are the one who's promoting that, then I think you can do that if you have a very sound strategy for your data center.
Thanks. Sir?
Yeah, when somebody requests a new server with your cloud, do you make it really easy for them to self-service to request a server, or do they still have to go through an involved process to adjust the price similar to what they would have to do if they were doing a physical machine?
So, Kevin, you're probably the...
Yeah, in Denton County, we have a server request form very similar to what we had in the physical world. The only difference is we, I think at this point, say yes to everything. We have I think when we started implementing VMware, we didn't really trust anyone who was telling us how much we can condense our server. So we ended up buying a lot more hosts and memory than we needed. So we have a lot of excess capacity right now. So typically, when we request a server, they're set up the same day that they're approved. So it's a very, very fast process. So they basically go through the same steps. It's just a lot easier to get approval.
I think the bigger danger comes with administrators who provision virtual machines and leave them running, forget about them, and they just sit there consuming resources. And that's all part of the designing the private cloud and automating workflow and life cycle and so on of the virtual machines. Shane.
Could you talk to us a little bit about, obviously there's ROI benefits and a consolidation factor, a management factor, but there's also the traditional cost centers in any traditional government entity. And there has to be some sort of upward and outbound selling process and having the discussions about the cost benefit savings and where that gets redistributed. Can you talk about maybe a little bit how you've sold that or how you're articulating that amongst your organizations on how any cost savings can be future redistributed throughout your organizations, or what departments reap the most benefit outside of the actual service?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that what's involved in selling virtualization internally, whether it's to your staff or to the people with the money. So maybe all three panelists can address that.
Sure. I think that's the only way you can get the politicians to invest in your projects. And I think the benefits are very clear. If you run through an ROI and a TCO, it's very obvious that consolidating servers saves money. It lowers operating expenses. It reduces the CapEx because you're not investing more on new servers, physical servers anymore. You lower the CapEx, you lower the OpEx, and your management becomes very easy. You're doing more work with less staff, so your man hours are less, and your efficiencies just shoot through the roof. Now, it's a little different on the VDI side because it's scary. Now, the VDI, I'm treading with a lot of caution because, yes, the numbers really, really look good when you do the TCO and ROI calculation for the VDI piece. But when you start looking at the IOPS and when you start looking at the actual disk that you need to consume to deliver performance, optimum performance, then you might be in for a surprise. You'll be, and that doesn't mean that it cannot succeed and you can't reach those numbers. You can. You just need to get a little more creative in how you deploy your VDI. You need to augment the limitations of the disk I/O with other strategies. So when you do that, you'll get, and if you succeed, then you'll get very, very tremendous ROIs.
Kevin?
In Denton County, Texas, we're very centralized. The IT is responsible for all of the IT expenses, basically, so we don't distribute the cost or the savings out to the other cost centers. So that part of the question is easy for us. For selling virtualization, it was actually fairly easy for us. We had a really good ROI I think, as a lot of people do who implement this. And what happened with us, we were trying to implement Hyper-V for a long time, and we had a large number of servers that we were planning on replacing as part of our annual replacement process. And towards the end of the fiscal year, we still hadn't figured out how we were going to do the Hyper-V virtualization project, and came up with a solution rather close to the end of the fiscal year. And we basically took all of the money that we were spending on our servers, put it into Hyper-V. So we didn't ask for any additional funding for our project. So it was easy to get it.
And John, and then we'll take some more questions.
Sorry, I'll try to make this quick. So San Francisco again. You have to kind of go back in history for us, not to sound really old here, but you have to remember in San Francisco, like most other governments, there wasn't an IT department when the city started, right? We actually grew out of the Department of Electricity. So most governments and cities I've worked for view historically IT as an expense. It's buried in departments' budgets in what I call the paperclip fund or something, right? There's not a line item that says here's a department's IT budget, here's how their IT budget is broken down by department. There is traditionally in a large government agency, eventually a central IT department will develop either by administrative code or organically. In our case, we've been fortunate again in the last 4 or 5 years to change, I think, the attitude and perception of IT from an expense that's simply buried in people's budgets to a strategic investment about how should we be spending IT dollars across the city, looking at it as we've created this governance structure where there's what I would call an investment board of department heads that get together, elected officials, including the president of the board, the mayor's office. And probably for the first time in San Francisco, there's actually that level of involvement saying, wow, we spend $100 million a year on servers. Does that really make sense? Is that where we should be spending our money? Because our constituents want web apps in the field so they can report potholes and things like that. So if we have a limited amount of money to spend, where should we be spending? Where should we be investing on our dollars? So we raised, I think, the conversation to a different level about how we were expending IT funds and changed the conversation from IT as an expense to an IT as a strategic investment. It's both good and bad. Once you create an awareness of how much an organization's spending on IT, there's always a desire to cut it because IT is a lot less important than, libraries, police officers, and things like that. On the other hand, if you can align yourself with the business units to show how IT enables or improves those business unit services, then you have a lot better case to create an investment fund. So for us, it's a little bit of a carrot and a stick. We've created awareness. That's the carrot. We have an opportunity to get more investment. That's the carrot. The stick side of it is, at the end of the day, we do need to realize savings, and there's a reluctance for people to give up money. So we do things like, at the beginning of every budget season, like this budget season, we put 10% of all departments' IT funds on reserve. Before they can get that money off what we call reserve, they have to come to the board and demonstrate how what they're doing aligns with our strategic initiatives and give a portion of that money back or risk losing all of it.
Thanks, John. On the desktop side, one of the things that I always encourage people to do is stop buying PCs, and then users start clamoring more and more, and makes it an easier political sell for the VDI. In the back there. Yes, sir.
So we're both we're a Cisco shop. Actually we have a lot of Juniper. We use Juniper on the voice side a lot for what we do on the voice side. But specific to your question about Cisco UCS, yeah, we were worried. I think I said this earlier. When you're in a government and you have a pot of money to spend, you don't get to say oops. I mean, if you make a mistake, you're stuck with that mistake. So that was a tough decision for us. We are happy with it. And it's one of those things I think it's going to work out well for us. I've been part of a decision-making process for a lot of government organizations, and sometimes you have to take a risk to reap a reward. And I think this is one of those cases where we felt like we were taking a risk. I did as much homework as we could. Again, we're fortunate. We're close to Cisco. We got to go down to labs, try it out. We got a lot more of the staff that actually work on the equipment down there. It wasn't just a budgetary decision. I mean, it was about the technical evaluation. But we were worried about it then. It's working well for us now. Frankly, I still worry about it, but we partner with Cisco, and we do see them as a good strategic partner, and we think they're as invested in as a success as we are. So,
yeah, just a quick UCS story. Last year, I don't know what it's like this year. I haven't been there yet. But when we walked in the halls of the front doors of the Moscone Center, and a makeshift data center was the UCS. Did you see it last year? And it had a sign on it. We're not just blinking lights, we're running VMworld, and it was running 37,000 VMs. But the really impressive thing, it was set up over 2 days in this makeshift data center in Moscone Center. And I'm a VMware vExpert, and my wife was with some of the other vExpert spouses who happened to all be women. And they're all laughing at their geeky husbands that when they went into VMworld, the first thing they did is they ran over to this UCS display and started taking pictures with their camera phones. So it's a very impressive unit. In the back there, was there another question? Yes, sir.
So there was one other question about delivery mechanisms. This could extend into SaaS and PaaS potentially, platform as a service, software as a service. My question is more around, now tenants itself, I see you consolidated your infrastructure, but are you planning to get into this some sort of, say, workload management, metering, utilization, what you mentioned about reclamation, if there's VMs out there. Are those in the picture today, or are you planning to go in that direction in the future? Or can you speak to that?
Khalid?
Well, you see, there is a great impetus and need basically for shared services. And what we've tried to do is position ourselves in a way that we can provide, a platform for other agencies, municipalities to basically hop on and share. Now, when we do that, we will obviously need to do chargeback. We will need to implement Lifecycle Manager and be able to, bring the machines up and control their life cycles and turn them back off. But that happens when we actually go into that, and we are strategically positioning ourselves to head in that direction, and we hope to be able to use all of the tools that VMware provides and very effectively provides for that purpose. And there is a growing need because of the shrinking budgets to consolidate. And that is going to continue, and it's going to continue with the counties taking on more of the traditional municipal IT roles, take on their shops. And when we do that, we definitely need to, we're strategically positioning ourselves in that direction.
Kevin?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so are you basically, as I understand the question is, are you implementing private cloud today, or are you kind of positioning yourself to start automating the services and turning IT into a service, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, probably somewhere in between. We're rather new to this. We've been running VMware for less than a year. Right now, we're creating a private cloud just for Denton County, and in the future, we are looking at expanding it more, using some more VMware's tools. We've also talked with a lot of other municipalities about sharing private clouds amongst us. The actual Denton County, the city where our county seat's located, is also a very big VMware shop. They've done a lot of desktop virtualization, and they're a little bit further ahead of us on virtualization. So they've been a really good partner, and we look at partnering with them a lot more in the future.
And of course, VMware as an organization is hugely invested in providing the tool sets and the framework to enable a private cloud, and they'll be talking a lot about that, at VMworld, this conference. Other questions? Yes, sir.
When you look at virtual desktop, people do that for different reasons. Sometimes it's that, we want to get rid of the PCs and go to thin clients. Sometimes it's easier to babysit all the desktops if they're living in a virtual instance. And I wondered, for those of you who have done the virtual desktop, if you can kind of stack rank, what was the biggest reason for you? Sometimes it's because you're able to reach an unmet need, meaning remote office workers. You want to get out of the business of having to replace PCs as they broke for your remote workers, and they buy their own device, and all you got to do is present some sort of corporate desktop. So you want to comment what your decision tree was?
Sure, I can comment on that. The biggest concern that I had personally was the fact that data in a desktop is not secure. It gets lost. When PCs die, then the data, generally speaking, goes away. Although we have set up network shares to kind of put that data on the network somehow, it really is a very, very inefficient method of really controlling the data. What you really need to do strategically is to take the data from the desktops and bring it into the data center and use data center tools to secure it. I mean, and then you can scale it and manage it easily. You have images that you can deploy very quickly, but there's a compelling reason to do it. The only thing you need to make sure is that you do it right and you align yourself with the right partners when you get it done, because if you don't, then you'll get burnt. I mean,
in Denton County, we just started a small desktop pilot about a month or so ago, and we really did it more for the unmet needs. In our situation, we have a lot of outside agencies, like state agencies, that office in a county facility, and they want access to our network. We don't trust their clients because we don't manage them. We can't ensure that they're protected. So we're looking at desktop virtualization to take care of that need for us.
Yes, sir.
Are you working with isolated LANs, extranets, or zone-facing environments that have a requirement to protect data? You have a huge infrastructure where information security blocks us. Doesn't matter how great the business is, you can't get past the policies that they have. At least it looks like it might be an education issue. I'm wondering how you dealt with it. How did you handle it?
So the question is, how do you handle security policies and roadblocks?
It's a stumbling block for me right now to find how to get these people on board.
Yeah, and that's a problem faced by both private and public sector commonly. John, you want to?
Maybe I can address that a little bit. The approach we've taken, at least in this city, we have the public safety network, we have a health system network, we have a private network for the libraries, so people can use library computers for whatever they want. We have community housing network that we run. We have our own kind of city secure network. So what we've done is we actually had two, again, this is kind of a realignment of our strategy. We had two initiatives going on. We had data center consolidation, and then we had, again, this sort of older, archaic network that had grown up over time and networks to meet multiple needs within the organization. So we're actually joining the two initiatives together now. And again, the governance structure we set up is useful because it allows us to do some education of the policymakers as well, to say, not only do we have to do data center consolidation, but we have to re-architect our networks to continue to support the needs of the users, but to not only join these data center sites together, but continue to meet these different needs. And so we actually have two diagrams, and I can connect you with my manager of network services if you'd find it useful, that we use as educational pieces to say, here's how the vision of the consolidated networks lays out on top of a consolidation of the data centers. And so we've joined the two together in their minds so they understand that there has to be a re-architecture of the both physical and logical network along with the data center consolidation. And it is going to cause a lot of change to both policies and practices with how we manage those things. And there's a number of decisions that are going to have to be made about that.
And that's one of the benefits of taking a strategic approach to virtualizing the data center and choosing the right platform. Cisco and their studies show that if you don't virtualize the network component because of tier 1 applications, because of regulatory concerns and security concerns, on average about 30% of the servers you can't virtualize. And, yeah, that's why the Nexus 1000V and the vFabric coming from VMware and all those pieces, nobody else addresses that out there right now in the industry.
And again, I mean, that's really why we, again, not to pick on Microsoft, but we changed our strategy because, the Hyper-V was working for us within a confined department, within a confined network. But once we stepped back from that and said, how do you collapse 40 networks all with different security and network requirements into a single consolidated virtualized approach, we just felt VMware was a better solution for us.
Sir, in the gray shirt.
Relative to virtualizing the desktop, what was the impact on users? Did you have to do any additional training for them to get them to accept it as a solution?
So how do you get users to accept VDI as a solution? Khalid, you want to talk about that?
Sure. I think it's a challenge, especially if you can't give them the look and feel and the usability that they used to have. So the design is very critical. We've decided to use AppSense for profile management, so that we can create profiles that really they're familiar with, that we can manage. And it's a process, but our vision and goal is to exceed the expectations of the user, to put together the technology in a manner that the user expectation is exceeded, and that's a commitment, and we're going to make it happen.
And just a real quick story. We were this is back in the days before virtualization, using Citrix, but the concept was similar. This was using Citrix and terminal server, the shared kernel mode, and we were thin client was the terminology back then. We were working with the school district and working with a pilot classroom, and it went production where it shouldn't have. The superintendent bullied our engineers. But anyway, we replaced all the PCs with wise win terms, except for 5 of the PCs we had to keep because not all applications run on terminal server. And these are the 5 cheapest, clunkiest clones you've ever seen. It was amazing they even ran. And the teacher needed one of those because she had some of the applications. Well, during the pilot, which was really production, her PC broke, which was not so surprising, or her keyboard broke, which was not so surprising. It was amazing it ran at all. But she really liked her keyboard for whatever reason. So we took another keyboard and plugged it in her PC, showed her it worked fine. We took her keyboard and plugged it in another PC and showed her that the keyboard was indeed broken. But she went out to all the other classrooms, all of them, and told the teachers, don't let them put Citrix in your classroom. It breaks keyboards. Killed the project. So user perception is absolutely crucial in a VDI deployment. It's in the blue shirt back there.
I was wondering if you had any issues with WAN optimization or consolidating data center. If you look at technologies like Riverbed or Buco or Cisco WAN, to help the WAN layers that might get more data transfer on providing the service across the WAN.
So optimizing WAN links. You want? Okay. And do you want to address that, or?
I can speak to that a little bit. Again, kind of back to what I was saying about data. I think we realized when we started inside, it's back to user perception again. One of the things my group does, we buy some fiber OptiMan stuff from AT&T, but I actually have a whole division that does fiber installations around the city. We manage about 200 some odd miles of our own dark fiber and lit fiber around the city. It's user perception, right? So as we were going through this virtualization path and we started testing out things and planning it out, there was this perception that the fiber was down. I've had 2 fiber outages in 5 years, right? My fiber's rarely ever down. It's a pretty rare occurrence and we bring it right back up. But again, we had to step back when we started this process and say, what are going to guarantee our success? And so one of the things that's really caused a huge amount of buy-in, it goes back to the carrot and stick approach, is, as we consolidate data centers and as we implement new switch networks, we're going to a 10 gig backbone now. We're ensuring there's QoS tools in place so that the customers that are connecting to these sites and are participating in this are seeing, a 300 or 400% increase in speeds to their PCs, because we're resolving a lot of the historic network issues where we could never replace the end devices quickly enough. We didn't have good QoS tools in place except at the central data center and things like that. So now we can see all the way out to a better demarc point in buildings and stuff like that. So by marrying a lot of these initiatives together, we're able to create sort of this enthusiasm to participate in it because they're seeing improvements to the service, not just that they're being forced to consolidate.
So we'll take one more question and wrap up. Yes, sir?
Did any of you evaluate Amazon Web Services as an alternative on-premise?
I missed that. Evaluate what in web services?
Amazon Web Services.
Amazon Web Services. Any of you evaluate Amazon as an alternative? I guess if not, why not?
Well, I've looked at it. I've looked at Salesforce.com. I've looked at, in fact, my help desk is a software as a service. It took a lot of hair out of my head to actually get it implemented, but since I've implemented it, it's working fine. The problem is you don't have control over these applications, and you've got this vendor who's sitting in Canada who speaks French that, it's hard to get them to, customize the application for you. It's the same thing with Amazon, I think. It's more as a platform, I guess, but
It's
infrastructure. No, I have not looked at that.
I did on an informal basis. Actually, a good friend of mine is the chief technology officer for a startup that uses they won Amazon awards for it's a company called Uyala. If any of you have heard of it, they won the Amazon Services Award a couple years ago, and that's all they do. They use Amazon services for everything they do. So he's a good friend of mine. Being a government, I'm poor. I can't afford really smart consultants all the time. So I bought him a couple lunches. I kind of laid out my challenges, and he said, "Wow, yeah, that Amazon would work for you in a couple areas. It's probably not a strategy you want to implement for your entire city right now." I think, though, the idea of infrastructure as a service, again, it's for governments, we're a laggard typically in adopting new technologies that we consider risky. We want to see how they pan out for other people. I couldn't tell you Amazon Web Services is something we wouldn't, or infrastructure is something we wouldn't consider, but I think that we're just dipping our toe in that water, and it's something we'll probably look at in the future. Once we get people comfortable with a shared infrastructure in the city, then I think it's going to be a much easier migration to get them to adopt things externally, particularly in light of what we want to do with DR and business continuity planning, where we can say it's a private infrastructure internally, but we're going to use Amazon or somebody else as our backup solution externally.
And just as a follow-up, if I may just add this, we tend to be parochial and, territorial. I don't think I would get any support from my law enforcement people to put anything out there on the cloud unless it's a private public sector cloud or a public safety cloud. Then it's okay, it's branded. But if you talk about Amazon or anywhere else, Google, I don't think we'll get the support.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and particularly thank our three panelists.